Hi, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you, discussing the Generative Archive and learning from you. Although my home is in Dubai, which is not very far, and it's dry, thankfully, after the storm, but the surrounding area is like a complete lake, so you sort of can't get in or out. But I'm really glad that I can be here on Zoom, and as you'll see, I'm also actually really grateful to this unplanned lake and the standstill moment, because paradoxically, that's actually at the heart of how I'm thinking about what is generative. So at NYU Abu Dhabi, I have been for 5 years running a lab called Haraka, which is part of Unloaded, and it bridges the social sciences and the arts. And Haraka is a multivalent word in Arabic. So on the one hand, it means movement, like political movement or physical movement, but also it refers to the diacritics. So the little shapes on top of letters in the Arabic language that give the language meaning. So for many years, and I'm going to switch here to my PowerPoint presentation to share something with you. Let's see if this works. Okay. Can somebody just give me a signal or say something to let me know if you're able to see my screen? Yes. Okay, great. All right. So for many years at NYU Abu Dhabi, my life looked like this. And as you can see from that short video, which has many of the harakat that I just mentioned, fatha, dhamma, shadda, but what I had omitted actually was a really important one called sukoon. But a year and a half ago, the sukoon came to find me and remind me that I had forgotten her. As soon as I was given a sabbatical and things started slowing down for me, I was hit by an extreme chronic pain, a sciatica, which is a kind of pain that runs from the lower part of your spine all the way down your leg to your heel. So you're unable to sit, to walk, or even to lie down. And during that time, my world became very small. So small, in fact, that it would fit inside this diacritic, sukoon. And after many months of trying all sorts of things, 6 months actually, I ended up asking for a medical leave because I was spending more time face down on examination tables in the offices of doctors, chiros, physios, and osteos. And I was not able to think or feel. And really, it was during that period that I was able to slowly move away from a place of rejecting my reality to resenting it, fighting it, working really hard to just fix it, and then finally to accepting it. And it was really in that last stage that my life started expanding in generative ways. And I was able to see the sukoon not as a non-movement or a non-sound, but as a necessary way of moving. And so I had been clutching to this idea of repair when in fact what I needed to do was to be open to the idea of healing. And so during this time, I started experimenting with alternative methodologies, things like somatic experiencing, embodiment, and awareness practices that go beyond the Cartesian mind-body divide. And so you'll see here, for example, on the right side of my screen is something called the slow walk. It actually has different names and different practices, but most people are aware of walking. In fact, you probably do it all the time and pay very little attention to it, except knowing the difference between kind of walking slowly and then walking fast. But if you start to walk slowly and break it down so much, literally second by second, frame by frame, what happens is that this very familiar activity becomes completely defamiliarized, and you start to experience your own body in a completely different way. And so many of these insights made their way into a new class that I would teach at NYU Abu Dhabi called the Body Archive. And so my students and I explore questions like this. What does it mean for the body to be a source of knowledge? How do our bodies connect us to the accrual of past history and the shifting landscapes of future trajectories? Is knowing thyself through the body a necessary condition for decolonization? What sense of attunement emerges from remembering the body as more than itself? And so in this inquiry, we read all sorts of texts. I'll give you kind of one quick example. In reading on decoloniality and decolonization, I picked 4 authors from different geographies and different disciplines: Ashila Membe, Gurminder Pambra, Munir Fasha, and Walter Mignolo. They're often understood as kind of historians, sociologists, education specialists, and a cultural anthropologist who also does literature, but truly, actually, they are public intellectuals. And all of them are critical of their own disciplines and the ways in which they're implicated in notions of colonial modernity. And so in elevating these kinds of voices that speak beyond the global north or reproduce ideas of disciplines in very particular kinds of ways, I'm hoping to get my students and myself to really think about the kinds of things that we learn, but also unlearn. And in reading these texts, we don't just simply learn from experts or public intellectuals about their insights, but we also develop a practice of embodied reading. For example, what does it mean when our eyes gloss over a page and the back of our neck starts tensing up? What is it that you've read when a little ball starts hardening in your stomach? Hardening, and growing larger. What happens when the notes that we're taking on the side of the page suddenly become faster than our ability to write them down, and we press down really hard with the pencil? What does it mean when we read in an embodied way? But going beyond the individual body, or the idea of the body as simply singular or separate from its environment, I tried to incorporate some somatic practices that also help us really think about the connection between our body and other human bodies, other non-human bodies, and the non-living. And so, for example, this is an exercise that we did, in fact, with an artist, Ana Bidart, who's Uruguayan Mexican. And it's a very simple exercise, actually, where you have a string that's laid out across the room, and you're supposed to be able to take turns moving the string, but you can't speak to the people around you. And so what unfolds in what seems like a very simple exercise is a deep awareness about how we're holding our bodies, what we're doing with them, interacts and affects the people that are around us. Finally, I also introduced some kind of formal practices that artists use for thinking of the body as an archive. And here I'm really going to present them for illustrative purposes, so kind of not really get into the details of the artists themselves or even the work. But the first here is Sara Brahim, who's a Saudi artist. She's trained in dance, performance, and a variety of kind of embodied practices. And you'll see here in 2 stills that I have in the middle of the slide from a work called Adagio, a kind of image of the sea, where Sara's figure is on the left at the very beginning of this video. And then if you move to that image at the bottom, you'll see she sort of slowly walks across the screen until she reaches the end. But what you see on the right is actually an image that's taken from the camera that she's holding here, very close to her body, so closely, in fact, that she talks about it as an external organ. And so this camera gives us a very different view and feeling of what is happening in the same landscape, because this camera captures the sea from a vantage point of Sarah's body as she's breathing, as her feet are walking on the sand, and as it interconnects with the birds, the boats, and the other elements of nature in the environment. A totally different approach to thinking about body and archives comes from two artists that I hosted recently. Reem Falaknaz, who lives between Dubai and Muscat, and Lara Shaheen, who lives between New York and Beirut. And they had a joint exhibition, of which you can see the publication, Swallow This, on the left-hand side, where they sort of explore the body and gender politics, specifically in this region. And I'll just give you, I guess, a bit of a kind of a tidbit here. So Reem has a project that was called If a Hymen Breaks and No One Hears It, where she archives the various sites of exchanges by experts. So these can be chefs, doctors, beauty clinics, with young women concerning hymen reconstructive surgery. And so you'll see here in the middle of the screen at the top, a screenshot of WhatsApp exchanges between one of these experts and a potential client, a potential customer, with claims of sort of expertise and things working. And she sort of almost ethnographically documents the ways in which certain kinds of language are used. For example, calling the potential client my dear in this kind of infantilizing way, and also documents the political economy of exchange. So how much these kinds of procedures cost, how people finance those kinds of procedures, and how they get to talk about their experiences. Lara, on the other hand, in her work, Bless Your Beauty, or in Arabic, Khalili Jamalik, shows us actually this public billboard, which shows in Lebanon, which you can see here in the middle of the screen. And she documents how actually it's not a singular billboard, but in fact, it keeps repeating itself every few miles until it becomes a full landscape of advertisement for plastic surgery. And similar to Reem, her research is not simply kind of in documentary format where she's capturing images, but she actually kind of engages a sort of an almost like anthropological or ethnographic stance where she goes to some of these clinics and examines the kind of like details of the exchange that happened between the doctors, the cosmetic surgery experts, and the potential clients. And so in both of these cases, what they highlight to us is that in many ways, the body is implicated in kind of these very private and taboo types of exchanges, yet at the same time is hyper visible and public in the most obvious of ways. The third one, and I think this is maybe the last one I'm going to share, is an exhibition that was called Crystal Clear, that was held recently, so February of this year, curated by Sarah Ben Safwan and Zainab Hassoun, who are both curators based in Dubai. And they have a collective called Studio Salasil, which is how they work. And in this exhibition, I asked them to kind of share with us what it meant for them to do this kind of work, to curate an exhibition as we are all witnessing live an ongoing genocide, especially that many of the artists that are involved in their show, and even for them as curators, the ongoing political events have taken a really big toll on their lives, on our ideas of community, on our ideas of what kind of world we live in, actually. is at the moment. And so in their conversations with us, they shared some of this, not only the curatorial work, but the sort of effects on their bodies and how they had to change some of the kind of basic ways in which they did their work. But they also talked about the choices of artists that they engaged with and how, in some ways, actually thinking about archiving this moment meant that they could use and invent new rules for kind of shaping what they were doing. And so one example of the work in their exhibition is Ahmed Makiya, who in fact is a publisher, writer, and editor, but he has this kind of super interesting publication, Sumar, which actually is a sort of guide to self-publishing in Abu Ghraib prison. And you can see here on the right, I'm just going to play it so you can see, there's like a tutorial, which is available publicly on YouTube, that allows you to see how when you receive this publication, you can actually yourself recreate the ways that prisoners in Abu Ghraib hid their writings inside a laundry detergent box called Summa. And here I'm reminded of Antonio Gramsci's idea of the body archive, in which he says the starting point of critical elaboration is the consciousness of what one really is, and is knowing thyself as a product of the historical processes to date, which has deposited in you an infinity of traces without leaving an inventory. And so I'm not going to go through the rest because I think that kind of gives you a bit of an idea, but what I'd like to sort of maybe conclude with is really thinking about what it means for our conversation on the generative archive if we're taking the body into consideration. So if the body is the archive, who is the archivist? Who has access to archival materials? And is preservation actually the primary purpose? How would we center feeling in archival processes? And finally, this is perhaps the thought that came to me, or the question that came to me as I was reflecting on this particular moment in my life, unable to come to Abu Dhabi because of this lake that surrounds my house. Is acceptance a condition for being generative? What does it mean for us to not simply reject, fix, and push, but be open to acceptance as a potential mode for being generative? Thank you.